Before the greatest flood in history, before cities like Sodom were turned into ashes, the world had already witnessed a sin so terrible that even God could not ignore it. It wasn't humans who committed it. It was the angels, those who were sent to protect us. They saw the women of the earth. They desired them, and they couldn't hold back their longing. So they came down, leaving heaven behind, to do what was strictly forbidden. From that forbidden union, a new kind of being was born, half human, half divine. We call them the Nephilim. They were unlike anything we've ever known. Stronger, crueler, and without fear. They brought violence, chaos, and blood to the world. And because of them, God had to wipe everything away. This is a true story, but most people have never heard how it really began. They were sent to watch, not to touch, not to interfere, not to love. Below them, mankind moved with raw beauty, imperfect, yet radiant. Semjaza once believed heaven was enough, but the more he watched, the more he felt a hollow space inside. He couldn't name it, but his heart beat differently when he looked down. He saw a mother cradle her child in trembling arms. He heard laughter when the rains came. They held no power, but they held something light could never grasp. Then he saw her, an ordinary woman. Not divine, yet her gaze unsettled something deep within. He knew he shouldn't stay, but he returned again and again. Each visit chipped away at his loyalty. Each silence made the ache louder. It wasn't just desire, it was hunger to belong, to touch, to feel, to live as they lived. Semjaza stopped praying. The sky no longer replied. Heaven's silence was no longer a test. It was a distance growing colder. Other watchers began to change. None spoke of it. They feared that speaking would make it real. They feared it was already too late. One night, Semjaza stood at the edge of the light. Winds from two worlds pressed against him. Behind him, heaven watched but said nothing. Ahead, the woman moved unaware. He took one step. No one stopped him. From above, a single feather drifted down. White, silent. Like a farewell heaven would not say. Like judgment waiting to be spoken. From that moment, heaven grew quiet. Not with patience, but separation. No more warnings, only a countdown. They thought it was only a moment, just one step across the veil. But once the boundary was crossed, something changed in them forever. Semjaza no longer watched from a distance. He walked among them. The sky behind him grew pale. The air around him grew heavy. He had taken the form of a man, but he was not one of them. His presence unsettled the animals. Children stopped laughing when he passed. Yet the woman he watched before, she did not turn away. Her name was Arela, and she saw something strange in his eyes. He didn't speak at first, just helped her lift water jars. He didn't know why, but the act filled him with warmth. Not divine warmth, but something messier, earthier, like dirt under fingernails, like the ache of a real day's work. Semjaza began to return each day, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Desire was not instant. It grew like fire under dry grass, soft at first, then fierce. Other watchers saw what he was doing. Some mocked, some followed. They too wanted what he had tasted. They too wanted to feel. Soon, they were walking in human form, tending sheep, joining meals, laughing at jokes they barely understood, but somehow loved. Semjaza knew the others had crossed the same line, but he also knew his heart burned stronger. He dreamed of Arela, not as a subject, but as a companion. She asked him once, "Why do you never speak of where you came from?" He lied. "It's too far to matter." She laughed and touched his arm, and he didn't pull away. That night, his wings burned beneath his skin, but he let them stay hidden. Desire changed them, not only in spirit, but in flesh. They began to feel weight, time, fear. They began to hunger in new ways. Food, touch, possession. Things no angel was ever meant to crave. Semjaza stood before the others. They gathered in silence. 50, then 70, then 200. He said, "If we are to stay, let us stay with purpose. Let us take women as our wives. Let us raise children as our own." Some hesitated. Some looked up, waiting for a voice from heaven. But no voice came. Only silence. That silence became permission in their minds. And that permission became a pact. Each angel chose a woman, not with violence, but with fire in their eyes. Arla saw the change in Semjaza's voice. It trembled now. He asked to stay with her, not just for days, but forever. She touched his face. "Are you a man or something else?" He said, "I am no longer sure." They lay together beneath the olive trees, not in shame, but in strange wonder. And the stars above turned away. In time, other men began to notice. Women taken. Children born too quickly. Flesh that grew faster. Strength that broke tools. The Watchers rejoiced. They saw themselves in these new sons. They called them mighty. They called them Nephilim. But the fire of desire did not end with love. It grew into ambition, into jealousy. The Watchers began teaching secrets not meant for Earth. Metals, potions, sorcery, war. Men learned to wound more deeply. Women learned to seduce more strongly. Children learned to rule before they could walk. Semjaza tried to ignore what they had done, but even he saw it now. The world no longer felt clean. Arla gave birth to a son. The boy's eyes glowed in the dark. He never cried. He never slept. Semjaza held the child and knew. This was not a blessing. It was a beginning of something the earth could not hold. And still, heaven said nothing. No thunder, No flame, just silence. But in that silence, something was gathering. Something far more terrible than desire. One of the younger watchers trembled, his voice barely a whisper. What if heaven hears us now? Semjaza turned to him. His eyes were not angry, only tired. Then heaven should have spoken sooner. Azazel nodded in agreement. What God ignores those who ache to belong, the others said nothing. But their silence was not peace. Some looked up, hoping for a crack in the sky, even a sign of disapproval, a flash, a storm. But there was only the wind and the stillness of stone. So they took silence as consent. Semjaza knelt and placed his hand on the earth. This ground will remember us. He traced a circle with crushed herbs, with charcoal from a fire below. He mixed it with water from a stream that ran cold and fast. This is not magic, he said. It is memory. Our vow must live where we live in flesh, in breath. They each knelt in turn, some with pride, some with regret, all with the knowledge that there was no going back. They swore in pairs, holding hands, eyes open. Some trembled, others whispered fiercely. Semjaza spoke last. Let this oath bind our names. Let it cover our sons and our sons' sons. Azazel added, and if we are cursed, let the curse fall on all of us. No one disagreed. Not aloud. The sky remained still, but the mountain seemed to grow colder, as if something beneath it had begun to stir. Far off, a wolf howled. Then another answered, not warning, but mourning. They stood in a circle as the night deepened, and in that moment, they were not angels. They were beings who had chosen something irreversible, not for love, not for justice, but for hunger. Semjaza looked once more at his brothers, and something inside him whispered, "This will cost more than you know." But no one turned away, not even him. They descended the mountain with fire in their eyes, and with the weight of heaven on their backs. The watchers had crossed a line, but their journey had just begun. Desire opened the door. Knowledge would set the fire. Azazel moved first. His hunger went beyond touch. He gathered tools, stones, iron, and flames. He showed men how to shape them. The first sword was born not from war, but curiosity. But curiosity doesn't stay pure for long. Semjaza warned him, "Don't give them everything." Azazel smiled. What harm is truth? They taught secrets in whispers, beneath trees, by firelight, about stars, about signs, about how to change what was given. One watcher taught how to use roots for pain and for pleasure. Another showed how to draw power from the dead. Men listened, women too, their eyes lit with things no child should learn. A young girl once brought Azazel a lamb. He gave her a bronze blade in return. Soon the lamb stopped coming, and only blades remained. The watchers watched their teachings grow, but not all felt proud. Some felt their wings itch, like they wanted to fall off. Semjaza stopped visiting Arela for a while, not because he didn't love her, but because he feared what he was becoming. She saw the worry in his face. She touched his cheek. "What are you afraid of?" she asked. He said nothing, but his silence spoke louder than screams, and she knew something dark was spreading. Nephilim children learned fast, too fast. They lifted stones grown men couldn't move. They hunted with eyes that saw in the dark. They argued like kings, even before they learned to speak. One child cut down a tree in seconds. Another broke a wild bull with bare hands. People began to whisper, then fear, then bow. Azazel taught how to write symbols, how to mark doors, skin, and bones. Another watcher taught the language of storms, not how to stop them, but how to summon them. The earth did not speak, but it began to tremble, and animals fled places they once called home. Semjaza stood in a field of broken stones. He remembered the first time he touched Arela's hand. He missed the silence of heaven, not because it was warm, but because it had no weight. Now everything felt heavy, his body, his choices, even the air. He called a meeting. All the watchers came. Some laughed. Some looked nervous. "We've given too much," he said. "This wasn't the plan." Azazel folded his arms. "We've given them power. Power is truth. Without us, they'd still be crawling in dirt." One watcher stood up, but the dirt was honest. Another added, "Now it smells like blood." They argued, loud, sharp. The brotherhood that once stood on Mount Hermon cracked. Semjaza looked to the sky. Still no answer. But silence now felt different. Before, it was absence. Now, it was waiting. Waiting for them to finish what they started, or destroy themselves before heaven moved. Children of Nephilim began to fight, not with fists, but with hunger for more. They built shrines to the Watchers, painted their names in ash and blood. Semjaza walked past one of these altars. A child bowed to him and said, "Make me strong like you." He said nothing, just turned away, but his stomach twisted like a wound. One night, Arela stood with him under the stars. "Are we blessed or cursed?" she asked. He looked at her, then at their son. The boy no longer played, only practiced. Semjaza whispered, "We were never meant to teach them this, but now we cannot take it back." From the hills came drums, from the valleys screams. What once was knowledge had become war. And still, heaven said nothing, but every watcher felt it. The silence had changed again. This was no longer waiting. This was warning. They were born in silence, but the earth shook beneath them. Women screamed, not in pain but in awe. The children were too large. Their eyes opened before their lungs. Their hands grasped before they cried. No one knew what to name them, but the word Nephilim came like thunder. The Watchers stood by, some with pride, some with fear. Semjaza watched Arela's son walk before his first word. The boy crushed fruit without knowing. Other sons followed, taller, heavier, eyes burning like coals. They learned by watching. Then they taught. Villages built larger homes to contain them. Fields emptied faster under their hands. Men bowed to them. Women whispered prayers about them. But they were not gods. Only echoes of angels mixed with clay. Their strength became legend. Their silence terrifying. A boy named Sirach split stone with his fist. Another, Mael, outran a horse. They laughed loudly, then turned quiet when others stared. The Nephilim played rough, too rough. Trees fell, bones snapped. Children avoided them. Parents warned them, but no one dared stop them. One day, a shepherd was found dead. No animal had touched him, only a dent in his chest, like a mountain had leaned on him. Semjaza asked his son, "Did you do this?" The boy didn't answer, only looked up with eyes too old for his face. Azazel praised the children. "They are kings," he said, "born to lead." Semjaza said nothing, but something in him pulled back. The Watchers gathered again, this time with food and fire. Some toasted to legacy, others stared into flames. "We have created giants," one said. "But have we created good?" Another replied, "They are ours. That must be enough." Nephilim children fought each other, not for survival, but for pride. Blood spilled in rivers, yet no punishment followed. Humans began building walls, not for enemies, but for their sons. The sky grew red more often, the moon less visible. One Nephilim child lifted a lion, another strangled a bear. They smiled afterward, not knowing why it scared everyone. Women began fearing childbirth. Some ran into the woods. Others stayed but wept in silence. The Nephilim did not feel love, only loyalty or hunger. They obeyed their fathers, the Watchers, but they didn't understand mercy. Semjaza watched the cities change. Statues rose in the shapes of their sons. Temples burned with oil and song. Songs he did not write. Arla came to him, her hands shaking. "He doesn't sleep," she said. "He watches me all night, with eyes that don't blink." Semjaza held her, but felt no warmth in the hug. His son stood outside, motionless, like a tree watching. He gathered the Watchers again. "We gave life," he said, "but not souls. What grows without soul will only consume." Azazel laughed. "Then let them consume. This world was weak." Others clapped. Some stayed silent. Semjaza whispered, "Then we have become worse than the flood before." And no one answered him. The earth groaned in the night. The stars dimmed. Heaven was no longer silent. It was waiting for the end. The earth had changed, but heaven had not spoken. The silence was heavier now, like a storm waiting just beyond the hills. The Watchers no longer gathered. Their brotherhood had scattered. Some lived in high places, worshipped like gods. Others hid. Semjaza walked alone. Even his shadow seemed afraid to follow. He visited cities built by hands he had taught, but they no longer welcomed him. Statues of Nephilim stood taller than trees, their eyes carved too wide. Every altar bled. Every street echoed with chants. Azazel stood at the center of it all, crowned not by metal, but by fear. He smiled at the chaos, called it progress. Semjaza wept at night, not for himself, but for what he had let happen. He looked to the sky, still no voice, still no fire. But dreams began to change. Children cried in sleep. Animals ran in circles. The stars seemed restless. One fell without a sound. The Nephilim grew bolder. Their games turned deadly. One broke a mountain's edge. Another pulled down a gate meant to guard a city. Men prayed, but not to God. They begged their giants for mercy. Some women disappeared. Others turned pale and mute. Fathers dug graves with no names. Semjaza saw it coming, but no one would listen. Even his son began to speak with rage and hit with joy. Arla left him, not in anger, but in quiet terror. She took nothing, not even a goodbye. The sky cracked one morning, not with thunder, but with warning. Birds flew backward, trees bent without wind. A voice returned, but it didn't speak. It pulsed, through rivers, through dust, through the heart. Semjaza fell to his knees, not in worship, but in dread. He knew the time of silence was over. The other Watchers felt it too. Some ran. Some begged the ground to swallow them. But there was no hiding, not from the one they left. Azazel stood firm, smiling until the sky turned black. Then even he looked up, and for once, said nothing. The Nephilim laughed, until the clouds moved. Then they stopped. One child asked, "Why is the sun hiding?" No one answered. The rivers slowed. The ground cracked like old skin. The heavens watched. Semjaza whispered, "We have called down judgment," and still the sky said nothing. Because when heaven prepares to strike, it does not shout, it listens. Raphael carries chains, but the earth is preparing to resist. The giants do not fear. They know they are cursed hybrids, but also weapons mankind cannot defeat. The rebellion begins in blood, and it will end in fire. Judgment is near, but the Nephilim will not kneel.